Welcome to Epic Reads Unfolded. Today we're diving into The Unfair Advantage by Ash Ali and Asan Kuba. It's a book that really kind of flips the script on how we think about success in the startup world.
Yeah.
It's a little bit controversial, but get ready to rethink some of those bootstraps narratives we hear so often.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. The authors argue that, while hard work is essential, it's not the whole story. They really dive into these often overlooked and sometimes uncomfortable factors that can give entrepreneurs a leg up, a significant leg up.
It's like they're pulling back the curtain and saying, hey, let's be real about what really helps people get ahead. So what's the secret sauce?
Well, it's not so much a secret sauce as it is a framework for understanding your own advantages, even if they come from circumstances that you didn't choose. They call it the MILES framework. MILES. Money, intelligence and insight, location and luck, education and expertise, and status.
Okay, so let's unpack this MILES framework. Is the idea that you need all 5 of these to succeed?
Not necessarily. It's more about understanding your strengths and weaknesses within each of these categories. Some entrepreneurs might be really strong in money and status, while others might excel in intelligence and expertise. So the key is to be self-aware and then leverage your strongest miles.
So it's like you're assessing your starting hand in poker. You might not have a royal flush, but you can still win with a well-played pair of 3s. The authors use some pretty intriguing examples to illustrate this.
Yeah.
Right? Like the story of Evan Spiegel, the co-founder of Snapchat.
Yeah, Spiegel's story is a perfect example of how status can play a huge role in early success. Even before Snapchat, he had access to a network of very influential people, including Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google. Those connections likely opened doors that wouldn't have been available to most young entrepreneurs. So it's not just about having a brilliant idea. It's also about who you know and who's willing to back you.
That makes you wonder how many great ideas are out there that never see the light of day because the founders didn't have that kind of access. But the book doesn't just focus on the silver spoon crowd. It also acknowledges those who kind of hustle their way to the top, right?
Absolutely. Ash Ali, one of the authors, shares his own journey, which is full of twists and turns. He dropped out of college twice, but was driven by this relentless curiosity and a hunger to learn. He really dove headfirst into this emerging world of the internet, eventually landing a top job at Just Eat.
Yeah, that's a great example of how expertise, even without a traditional degree, can be a powerful, unfair advantage. It reminds me of something else the book emphasizes, mindset. They talk about a reality growth mindset. What exactly does that mean?
It's a fascinating concept. The idea is to balance self-belief with a realistic understanding of the role luck and circumstance play. It's like Harry Potter wanting to be in Gryffindor so badly that the Sorting Hat takes it into consideration. Wanting something fiercely can really drive you, but you also need to be realistic about the hand you've been dealt.
So it's about having that confidence to go after your dreams, but also the wisdom to recognize that some things are just beyond your control. Otherwise, you risk either blaming yourself for every setback or attributing every success solely to luck.
Exactly. And the book cautions against leaning too far into either extreme. A purely fixed mindset might lead you to believe that success is all about luck, while a purely growth mindset might blind you to the real advantages that others have.
It's a delicate balance, isn't it? Speaking of balance, how do the authors differentiate between intelligence and insight?
They highlight that intelligence comes in many forms. It's not just about IQ. There's street smarts, creative intelligence, emotional intelligence, to name a few. But insight is what sets those truly successful entrepreneurs apart. It's that ability to see below the surface and understand those unmet needs in the market.
So it's not just about being smart. It's about applying that intelligence to solve real problems and spot opportunities that others might miss. They have a great example of this with Jan Koum, right, the co-founder of WhatsApp.
Yes. Koum was obviously a very skilled programmer, but his real insight came from his personal experience growing up in Soviet Ukraine. He had a deep appreciation for privacy and a real distrust of advertising, which became core principles of WhatsApp. And that resonated with millions of users worldwide.
It's a brilliant example of how life experience can really fuel entrepreneurial vision. It makes you think about all the different forms of intelligence and how they can contribute to success in really unexpected ways.
Absolutely. The book even mentions Christopher Langan, who's considered one of the smartest people in the world with an IQ over 190. But despite his intelligence, he worked as a laborer for much of his life. It really shows that raw intelligence alone isn't enough. You need that spark of insight to turn it into something truly valuable.
Okay, so we've covered money, intelligence and insight, and status. Let's move on to another element of the Miles framework, location. Is it really that big a deal where you choose to set up shop?
It can be surprisingly significant. The book talks about this concept of clustering, which is where businesses in the same industry tend to group together for mutual benefit. Think Silicon Valley for tech, Hollywood for entertainment, New York for finance.
Right, we've all heard about the magic of Silicon Valley. But what makes those clusters so advantageous? Is it just about being in the right place at the right time?
It's partly that, but it's also about access to resources, networks, and a culture of innovation. The book uses the term knowledge spillover to describe that informal exchange of ideas and information that happens in those clusters. It's like you're immersed in this giant think tank where everyone is pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
That sounds incredibly stimulating.
Yeah.
But it also makes you wonder if it creates a sort of echo chamber where everyone's chasing the same trends. What about those who can't just pick up and move to Silicon Valley?
The book acknowledges that geographical location isn't everything. The internet has made it easier than ever to connect with people and resources remotely. But it also highlights how even something as simple as a prestigious address can really influence perception and status.
And they use the example of James Carrion, right? An entrepreneur and investor who strategically used a Mayfair address for his business early on to enhance his credibility. It's fascinating how these seemingly small details can really make a difference.
Yeah, it's about understanding those subtle cues and signals that shape perception, whether it's your physical location, your online presence, or even just the way you present yourself in meetings.
It's all about playing the game strategically.
Yeah.
Even if you don't make the rules. Speaking of playing the game, let's talk about the final element of the Miles framework, expertise. Is this where good old-fashioned hard work finally comes in?
Hard work is definitely a part of it. But the book really emphasizes that expertise is about more than just putting in the hours. It's about developing deep knowledge and skills in a specific area, whether it's through formal education, self-directed learning, or a combination of both.
So they're saying that a fancy degree from a top university isn't the be-all and end-all anymore.
They acknowledge that formal education, especially from prestigious institutions, can provide significant advantages in terms of signaling, status, and network building. But they also point to the changing landscape of education, with companies like Apple and Google dropping degree requirements for a lot of jobs.
So it's becoming more about what you can do, not just where you learned it. It's about proving those skills and knowledge in the real world.
Precisely. And the book is packed with examples of individuals who leverage their expertise to build these incredibly successful ventures. Take Demis Hassabis, the co-founder of DeepMind. His deep expertise in artificial intelligence, gained through years of academic research and self-directed learning, was absolutely crucial to his company's acquisition by Google for hundreds of millions of pounds.
Wow, that's an incredible example of how expertise can be a true unfair advantage. But what about those of us who maybe don't have a PhD in AI or years of experience in a specific field? Is there still hope for us mere mortals?
Absolutely. The book stresses that developing expertise doesn't happen overnight. It's a process of continuous learning, exploration, and refinement. And it's not about being an expert in everything. You just need to focus on developing a deep understanding of the area that's most relevant to your goals.
So it's about playing to your strengths and being willing to invest the time and energy to become truly exceptional in your chosen domain.
Exactly. And that brings us to another fascinating aspect of the Miles framework, status. This one can feel a bit tricky.
I was just thinking that. Status often gets a bad rap. It can seem so superficial or even unfair, but the book argues that it can play a significant role in entrepreneurial success, right?
It does. The authors break down status into different forms: economic capital, social capital, and cultural capital. And they argue that even your inner status, your self-confidence and self-esteem, can really influence how others perceive you.
So it's not just about being rich and famous.
Yeah.
Or having a fancy title.
Not at all. It's about the impression you make on others and your ability to leverage that impression to create opportunities. The book gives the example of the Collison brothers, the founders of Stripe. Their education at Harvard and MIT undoubtedly played a role in boosting their status and network.
Right. Those elite networks can open doors that would otherwise remain firmly closed. But what about those who might not have a prestigious education or a Rolodex full of influential contacts? How can they build status?
The book offers some practical advice on networking, even for introverts. They emphasize the importance of building genuine relationships and focusing on providing value to others. It's not about schmoozing or name dropping. It's about making those authentic connections and contributing to a community.
So it's about being strategic, but also authentic in your approach. You can't just walk into a room and demand respect. You have to earn it.
Exactly. And that's why the book dedicates a good chunk of time to the importance of personal branding. It's about understanding how you present yourself to the world and making sure your actions align with your values and goals.
It's all starting to come together. The Miles framework helps us analyze our own unfair advantages and then identify areas where we might need to level up. But how do we actually APPLY this to choosing the right startup idea and building a successful business?
Well, that's where part 2 of the book comes in. And that's exactly what we'll be diving into next. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. So now that we've got a good grasp of the Miles framework and how understanding those unfair advantages can really give you a leg up, let's look at how those concepts actually play out in building a startup.
Right, because knowing your strengths is one thing, but turning them into a thriving business is a whole other ballgame. The book kind of breaks down the startup journey into several key phases, and I love how it starts with choosing the right lifestyle kind of startup for you.
That's crucial because not all startups are created equal.
Yeah.
The authors distinguish between what they call lifestyle startups and hypergrowth startups, and they have very different paths, resource needs, and ultimately impact your lifestyle in very distinct ways.
So it's about being honest with yourself about what you really want to achieve and how much you're willing to sacrifice to get there. Can you break down those two types for us? Sure. So lifestyle startups are all about creating a business that fits your ideal lifestyle. They typically have lower startup costs, can become profitable more quickly, and they don't require massive external funding. Think of your local bakery or a freelance writing business or even an online fitness coach.
Got it. So it's about building a sustainable business that provides a good income and importantly, allows you to live life on your own terms. So not necessarily aiming to be the next unicorn, but creating something that brings you fulfillment and financial security.
Exactly. And this is where understanding your miles is so important. If you don't have a ton of money to invest up front, or you're not comfortable with the high-pressure environment of a hyper-growth startup, then a lifestyle business might be a much better fit.
Makes sense. Now, what about those who dream of building the next Google or Facebook? What defines a hyper-growth startup?
Hyper-growth startups are all about, hyper-growth. They're typically tech-focused, aiming for massive scale and rapid expansion, often with that goal of reaching $1 billion valuation or more. They tend to require significant investment, involve more risk, and demand a really relentless pace.
Definitely not for the faint of heart. So these are the kinds of startups that are constantly innovating, disrupting industries, and pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
Precisely. Think of companies like Uber, Airbnb, or Spotify. They've completely transformed their respective industries and grown at this astonishing rate. But this kind of success often requires a very specific set of unfair advantages. You'll likely need access to capital, a really strong network in the right industry, top-notch technical expertise, and that ability to navigate a highly competitive landscape.
It makes you realize that even with a brilliant idea, timing and context are everything. Knowing your miles can really help you determine if you're ready to play in that league. So let's say you figured out which type of startup is right for you. What's the next step?
The book emphasizes this critical idea validation phase. This is where you really test your assumptions, see if there's a real market for your product or service, and importantly, get feedback from potential customers.
Right. You don't want to spend months building something only to find out that nobody wants it.
Yeah.
So what's the most effective way to validate your idea?
The authors advocate for what they call a lean approach, which essentially means starting small and being willing to iterate quickly based on the feedback you get. This could involve simply talking to potential customers, building a basic landing page to gauge interest, or even creating a bare bones prototype just to get a feel for how your product might work in real life.
It's all about getting out of the building and testing your assumptions in the real world. Don't be afraid to get your hands dirty and talk to actual people.
Exactly. And this is where that reality growth mindset we talked about earlier really comes in handy. Be prepared to pivot, adjust, and even scrap your initial idea if the feedback suggests it's not viable.
So let's say you validated your idea and you're starting to see some traction. What's next on the startup journey?
Now it's time to build your minimum viable product or MVP. This is a stripped-down version of your product that has just enough features to attract early adopters and, crucially, get that valuable feedback.
Right. It's about focusing on the core value proposition and not getting bogged down in unnecessary bells and whistles. Better to launch something imperfect and iterate quickly than aim for perfection and never launch at all.
Exactly. The book shares some great examples of companies that launched with very basic MVPs and then iterated like crazy based on user feedback. Remember how clunky the early versions of Facebook or Airbnb were? They weren't pretty, but it got the job done and allowed those companies to learn and grow.
Those are some inspiring examples. Okay, so you've built your MVP, you're getting feedback.
Yeah.
And you're ready to start growing your business. Yeah. But what about funding? Is that something all startups need to worry about?
Not necessarily. The book acknowledges that. While some startups, especially those in that hyper-growth category, need significant investment to scale quickly, others can actually bootstrap their way to success using their own revenue and resources.
And they actually highlight Basecamp, a really successful software company that really prioritizes employee well-being and sustainable growth. They famously bootstrapped their way to success. It's a good reminder that there are different paths to building a successful business.
It all comes back to your goals, your resources, and your risk tolerance. But let's say you do need to raise funding. Any advice on navigating that process? Because it can be pretty intimidating, especially for first-time founders.
It can feel like a minefield, for sure.
The book offers a really practical guide to pitching to investors, including key elements to include in your pitch deck and common mistakes to avoid.
I'm sure there are some cringeworthy pitch deck fails out there.
Oh, definitely. But the key takeaway here is the importance of clear communication, having a really strong value proposition, and highlighting your unfair advantages. Investors want to see that you have a unique edge, a deep understanding of your market, and a team that can execute your vision.
So it's about telling a compelling story that makes investors believe in your potential, not just dazzling them with fancy jargon or unrealistic projections.
Exactly. Be realistic about your funding goals and be prepared to give up some equity in exchange for investment. Remember, it's a partnership, and investors want to see a return on their investment.
So it's about finding the right investors who align with your vision and values. And once you've secured funding, you can finally focus on growth, right?
That's right. The book really delves into strategies for achieving sustainable growth, including marketing, sales, and even what they call growth hacking, which is all about using creative and unconventional tactics to acquire customers quickly.
Growth hacking. That sounds a bit like a secret weapon for startups. What are some examples of growth hacks that have actually worked?
There are so many great examples out there. The book mentions how Airbnb in its early days cleverly took advantage of Craigslist to reach a wider audience. They essentially hacked the system to get their listings in front of more potential customers.
That's brilliant. It's about being resourceful and finding innovative ways to leverage existing platforms and communities.
Yeah, and it's a great reminder that growth doesn't always require huge budgets. It's often about thinking outside the box and finding clever ways to reach your target market. But there's one crucial element that the book emphasizes throughout: timing.
Timing. That elusive ingredient that can make or break a startup. We've all heard those stories of companies that were just in the right place at the right time.
The book shares the example of Facebook, which launched at the perfect time to capitalize on the rise of social media and a broadband internet. It was like catching a wave at just the right moment.
But how can entrepreneurs predict or even influence timing? It seems so unpredictable.
It certainly can be. But the book offers some great insights into how to assess market trends, understand emerging technologies, and even identify societal shifts that might create opportunities for innovation. It's about being aware of the broader context and recognizing those moments when the stars align for a particular idea.
Like being a surfer who understands the nuances of the ocean and can sense when a big wave is about to break. But the book also cautions against the risks of being a first mover, which seems kind of counterintuitive. Aren't first movers supposed to have the advantage?
That's a common misconception. While being first can generate a lot of buzz and capture early market share, it also comes with risks. First movers often have to educate the market, face higher costs, and as we've seen in the tech world, risk having their ideas copied by larger companies.
Right, so it's like paving the way for others to follow, which can be both rewarding and frustrating.
Exactly. The authors give the example of Palm Pilots, which were essentially the first smartphones, but they never achieved widespread adoption. They were ahead of their time, but the market wasn't quite ready for them.
So timing is about recognizing those moments when an idea is both innovative and D has a receptive market. It's about striking that sweet spot between being ahead of the curve and not being so far ahead that you alienate your audience.
Precisely. It's a delicate dance, but one that can lead to remarkable success when executed properly. But there's one final piece of the startup puzzle that we need to talk about.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What's the final piece?
It might seem a bit out of place in a book about business, but the authors dedicate an entire chapter to the importance of mental health.
Oh, that's so important, but often overlooked. Building a startup can be such an emotional roller coaster. It's so easy to get caught up in the hustle and neglect your well-being.
The authors really emphasize that entrepreneurial success shouldn't come at the expense of your mental and physical health. It's about finding a sustainable pace, building a supportive network of friends and mentors, and prioritizing self-care.
It's easy for those things to fall by the wayside when you're so consumed with building a business. It's a good reminder that you need to take care of yourself if you want to be able to take care of your business.
Exactly. The book challenges us to rethink what success truly means and to build businesses that are both profitable and contribute to a better world, a world where entrepreneurs can thrive without sacrificing their well-being.
This has been such an insightful exploration of the startup world and the often hidden advantages that contribute to success. We've covered a lot of ground, from analyzing your own mile to navigating the various stages of building a business. But I think the most important takeaway is that success isn't like a one-size-fits-all formula. It's about understanding those unique advantages that you have and playing the game strategically and building a business that aligns with your values, but also with your well-being.
Yeah, I think that's a great summary of what the unfair advantage is all about. It's a really refreshing perspective on entrepreneurship. It encourages us to kind of move beyond those simplistic narratives that hard work and talent are like the only ingredients for success.
Right. It acknowledges those hidden factors that can give some people a significant head start, like access to capital.networks, or even just that confidence that comes from growing up in a certain environment.
Exactly. And it does a great job of balancing that awareness of privilege with a really empowering message of agency. You know, it doesn't leave you feeling helpless or discouraged. Instead, it challenges you to take stock of your own unfair advantages, however big or small they may be, and leverage them to achieve your goals.
That's what I found so empowering about the Miles framework. It's a tool for self-assessment, not self-judgment. It helps you understand your strengths and your weaknesses, and then it's up to you to decide how you want to play the game.
And the book provides some really practical advice on how to do that. Whether it's choosing the right type of startup, validating your idea, building that MVP, securing funding, or just navigating those ups and downs of the entrepreneurial journey, the authors offer insights and strategies that can really help you make smarter decisions.
It's like having a seasoned mentor in your corner, guiding you through the process and sharing those hard-won lessons.
Yeah, and one of the most important lessons that they emphasize is the importance of defining success on your own terms.
That's a point that really resonated with me, because it's so easy to get caught up in the hype and the pressure to conform to a certain definition of success, whether it's raising millions of dollars, going viral on social media, or building that billion-dollar company. But ultimately, success is about creating a life and a business that aligns with your values and brings you that sense of fulfillment.
It's a reminder that entrepreneurship isn't just about making money. It's about making a difference, whether it's in your own life, or your community, or the world at large. The Unfair Advantage is a must-read for anyone who's ever dreamed of starting a business or just wants to understand those complex dynamics of success in the modern world. It's a book that will challenge your assumptions, inspire new ideas, and empower you to take action.
Yeah, it's a reminder that the game might not always be fair, but we can still play it strategically and create our own versions of success. So analyze your miles, embrace your unique journey, and never underestimate the power of even small advantages.
Remember, the world needs your ideas, so go out there, make a difference, and build the future you want to see.
And that concludes our deep dive into the Unfair Advantage. We hope you found it insightful and inspiring. Subscribe to our channel for more exciting deep dives into epic reads.